In this video, we will share some examples about how to improve and enhance trims in VStitcher. 2.5D trims are 2D images made to look much more realistic with a near 3D appearance. We do this by a few different methods involving artwork or trim physics, maps, and creating new patterns to attach these trims to. This can be useful when we do not have access to 3D artists or materials. Let's go through an example. Creating a 2.5D button. We have two options to do this. One is by using auto-generate depth maps, and another is by using artwork thickness. The first option of using auto-generate depth maps requires a button image with no background. This may be best achieved with a good quality resolution scan to include the threads of the buttonholes. We open the button image in Photoshop or other image editing software and remove any existing background. Then we save the file and add the image as a trim in VStitcher. We assign the button to the garment. Then go to Trim Properties in the Context view and select Auto-Generate Depth Maps. This option automatically creates the normal and displacement maps for the trim. However, the normal and displacement maps created are usually simple maps and may not include the details required. This is perfect if you're doing it for simple trims, but not ideal if we have more details. Do remember that the displacement map effect can only be visible with a ray trace render. The other method is using artwork thickness. This is useful if we require to submit a normal render instead of a ray trace render. The thickness would be visible in the 3D window as well. Let's start off in Photoshop, where we have edited out the background of the image. Next, we want to add a background that is similar in color with the button. We can use the fill option for this and pick the correct color using the color picker. We need to crop the edges of the buttons like this. We save this file. Now we bring the button image we have edited into VStitcher as a trim. We create a circle the size of the button we require. We use the transformation values to adjust the size of the circle. Next, we right-click on the pattern and remove the fabric. We drag and drop the button image and assign it into the circle pattern. The button should fit into this pattern. If it doesn't, it may be because the button image was not cropped properly. We can check this in the image editor. The next step is to drag and drop this pattern onto the garment and position it where it is intended to be. The outline of the button pattern turns pink, indicating that it is now an attachment on the garment. This means that if we load the garment, this button would appear like an assigned image, trim, or artwork. Next, we go to the physics for the button. We want to give the button some more thickness to make it look more realistic. We increase the thickness to meet the desired look. Let's change it to 1.5 millimeters. We recommend not using too high a thickness, as this makes the button look unnatural. Now if we view the button sideways in the 3D window, it has thickness to it, and is no longer just a flat image. The sides of the button are rounded, but if we need them to be flat, we can adjust the finish effect of the edges of the attachment to be flat. If we want this button to replace a 3D Smart Button trim, we can do this using the following steps. We start off by selecting the Smart button we want to use. Next, we assign it to the garment as intended. In the Context view, we change the button's transparency to 100%. We make sure to do it on the other components of the buttons as well. Then we place the 2.5D button on the location where the 3D button was supposed to be. And that's it. If we need to create more detailed normal and displacement maps, we can do so in Photoshop or other image editing software. This is an optional step. The normal and displacement maps generated in Photoshop may not be 100% accurate, but should be good enough to make the trim look more realistic. The quality of the map also depends on the resolution of the image. If you have access to Visu scanners and Xtech software, that setup can automatically generate material maps which you can use. If the trim has patterns on it, generating a normal or displacement map with this image causes the maps to be incorrect, as it also picks up the patterns from the image. A quick solution is to also scan the same trim but as a plain color, which can be used to generate the normal map, or to remove the patterns in Photoshop. Similarly, the background must be edited out. Once we have this, we can generate the normal map first. We go to Filters, 3D, and generate a normal map. We adjust the values and use the cube preview to see the effect of the normal map. We want a normal map that is not too defined or too blurred. This looks just about right. We save this as a new file and label it as _NRM. In the history, we load back the version before the normal map was created. Then we generate the displacement maps. We go to Filters, 3D, and generate a bump map. Again, we adjust the values and use the cube preview to see the effect of the displacement map. Now we save this as a new file and label it as DISP. We name the maps and label them with NRM and DISP to indicate what they are. In VStitcher, we load these new maps in the respective channels in the trim properties. We can adjust the depth value sliders and use Ray Trace Render to view the effect of the maps. For the next example, we are going to create this chain detail. We want to share with you how going a step further to create patterns for certain trims can really help to improve the look of our garments. This is a similar concept to when we created drawcords in the VStitcher 201 garment creation course. We created patterns for each part of the trim and assigned images of the trims on them. To start off, we need to have a chain image which is captured in good quality. Let's use this image that we have. And next, in Photoshop, we need to edit out all the background and ensure that we have a seamless tile that can be applied as an edge assignable trim. We ensure that the image has been cropped to exactly the edges of the chain image and has no gap at the back. We save this as a PNG or PS file. In VStitcher, we insert a rectangle pattern piece for the chain. The width and length of the rectangle are those we want for the chain, 0.8 centimeters for the width, and 43 centimeters for the length. We assign the chain trim along the length of the pattern. Currently, we can still see the fabric in the background, so we want to import a blank image as a fabric. Then, we apply it to the chain pattern. We also need an image of the D-ring with the background removed. We want to attach the chain from the belt loop at the front of the skirt to the side of the pocket at the back. We need to create a small tab on the back pocket. We create a 2 centimeter square and add a fold line along the center. Then we stitch these two edges together. And we add another stitch from the top of the square to the pocket edge. We need to add this pattern into the Arrange mode and ensure that the 3D layer is higher than the skirt. Now we ensure Enable in 3D is selected, and we simulate this tab on the skirt. The next step is to position the D-rings. We add one below the belt loop at the front, and another at the new tab we created at the pocket back. This is now just a flat 2D image, so we want to enable Auto-Generate Normal Maps for this D-ring. To view the effect, we turn on the V-Ray preview. From there, we adjust the depth slider for the appropriate visual effect. Let's adjust the normal map to a depth of 1 and displacement depth to 0.2 centimeters. This looks good. Then we adjust the specular, roughness, and metalness to make the D-ring look more metallic. We want to make the chain look like it's attached to the D-ring. To do so, we use internal lines. Using the pen tool, we draw an internal line above the D-rings. Then we stitch the edge of the chains to the newly drawn internal line. We add the pattern into the Arrange mode. Then we adjust the 3D layer to be higher than the skirt. Now we ensure that Use in 3D is selected and dress the chain pattern. We may need to adjust the internal lines on the skirt slightly using the 3D window as a guide. This looks great so far, but the chain still looks pretty flat. We need to ensure that the auto-generated depth maps are selected. We use V-Ray Preview to gauge and adjust the depth values. Then, like the D-ring, we also adjust specular, roughness, and metalness to give it a more metallic finish. If we see a floating wide shadow on the edges, we need to change the stitch construction to flat seam. This looks great. In the previous examples, we went through how we used our knowledge of materials, maps, garment construction, and more, and built a workflow for the creation of more realistic-looking trims. These methods can be applied to different types of trims we need to add to the garment, and not only to the above examples. The techniques can be applied to other material types or workflows as needed. For example, to create maps for artworks, seams, or fabrics, or using patterns to construct a garment to achieve a certain visual effect. We need to experiment and to explore the tools and features to see what works best for the garment. For more information, visit our Help Center at support.browseware.com.